When a relationship ends, people are often completely overwhelmed. Some relationships die slowly, but in my experience, more often they disintegrate very quickly. Once there's a profound rupture, there's no going back to the way it was. In this video, I'm going to talk about exactly what is happening, why people get stuck in a loop, and how to get out of it. And I'm going to make this a little bit more about life after divorce, because for most people, the hardest part isn't just the day it ends. It's the weeks and months after, when you're trying to function, parent, work, sleep, and rebuild a life that doesn't look like what you thought it would. I've worked with a lot of people after divorce, and I've lived through it personally to know this. Most people struggle to recover, but not because they aren't trying. They simply don't know what to do and when to do it. So let me show you the typical pattern, and once you see it, you'll stop feeling a little crazy. So at some point in a relationship, the likelihood of divorce becomes very real to both people. Usually one person initiates the divorce and the other resists the ending of the marriage. Now the resistor is in some version of shock. This person didn't expect this, and they are overwhelmed at multiple levels. They typically see a bigger effect than the person who initiated it. Not to say that the initiator doesn't have pretty significant effects, and this, the order here that we're talking about is the same. But typically it goes in this order. So there's a rupture in the relationship, and then there are things happening at the same time. Their self-worth drops. There's lots of intense feelings like anger, grief, shame, fear, and more. And then all of these overwhelming questions and thoughts come up. And people cycle among all four of these. We have an acronym for these four main areas that are affected. It's called RIFT. It stands for relationships, identity, feelings, and thoughts. And here's how that looks. For a lot of times, when the relationship ends, it's awkward being in the same space for a while. There's lots of tension, less warmth, hard conversations don't really go anywhere, and you start feeling alone inside the relationship. Now, I want to put a label on the loop that keeps people stuck, because this loop is a huge reason why life after divorce can feel so confusing and so heavy. And by the way, when I say life after divorce, I mean life after a relationship ends, whenever that is. So as far as this loop that people get stuck in, I call it the divorce doom loop. People get overwhelmed by all of these effects. A common scenario is that the overwhelm turns into numbness, numbness turns into rumination, rumination turns into panic, panic turns into reactive decisions, and that puts you right back into overwhelm. So overwhelm is when there's just too many decisions, too much fear, too many unknowns. People go numb because this is your system trying to protect you. You go flat, you go robotic. You do what you have to do to get through the day. And then there's the rumination. This is your brain trying to solve it. It's replaying everything. It's rehearsing what to say. It's thinking about what if, why, how could they have done this or that. And then for some, there's panic. And when you can't get certainty, your body feels like it's in danger. So then what happens? We start making reactive choices. And this is when people send the long text, they agree to something they regret, they pick a fight, they avoid everything, or they spend money impulsively, or things just escalate legally. So none of this means that you're weak. It just means that you're human and your body is in a loop. It's stuck. It's in this doom loop. Before I go on, I want you to hear this from someone who lived it, because if you're in this loop, you'll recognize it immediately. What did it feel like for you back then, from what you can remember?
From the beginning,
Yeah, before you took the class, where were you?
I was completely overwhelmed emotionally. My anxiety was off the charts. I was still in the denial phase of all of it. I was in shock, not sleeping, crying, trying to make sense of what just happened, begging and pleading to try and change the course of what was happening around me, and realizing I had no control. It was in the dead of winter, and it was just a really dark time.
That's the doom loop. If you've ever been there, especially in the months after a breakup or divorce, you know it's not just being sad. It's your whole system trying to survive uncertainty and to figure out what happened. Now, here's why this matters for life after divorce. Because once you're in this loop, it doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects what you do. And what you do affects how expensive and complicated the divorce becomes, in money, time, and energy. So divorce really has three pillars: the legal pillar, the financial pillar, and the emotional pillar. And if you have kids, there's a fourth pillar that becomes very real very fast: the parenting pillar. So here's the mistake almost everybody makes. And I'm not saying this to judge anyone, it's completely understandable. I did the same. But most people pour their time and money into the legal and financial pillars: lawyers, paperwork, deadlines, the house, support, custody, schedules. And yes, those matter, but divorce is also an emotional injury. If you don't work directly with the emotional pillar, it quietly drives what happens in the other ones. So here's the simplest way to think about it. Imagine a dashboard with four dials, one for each pillar: legal, financial, emotional, and parenting. And on that dashboard, there's also a set of resource meters, basically an indicator of how much of your total resources are being consumed: your time, your money, your attention, and your energy. So here's what happens. When the emotional dial is cranked up to a 10, overwhelm, panic, shame, grief, those resource meters don't stay contained to emotions. The legal meter goes up, the financial meter goes up, and if kids are involved, the parenting meter goes up. More conflict, more back and forth, more confusion, more delay, more reactions, more "I need my lawyer to respond to this," more "we need to revisit this," more escalation. And here's how you can measure the emotional dial in real life, because I want this to be practical, not abstract. When the emotional dial is high, you tend to do predictable things. You send long emotional messages, either to your ex or to your attorney. You respond quickly instead of strategically. You change your mind repeatedly. You avoid paperwork or miss deadlines because you're overwhelmed. You negotiate for validation instead of outcomes. You can't sleep, you can't focus, and your whole day gets eaten by stress. So those behaviors aren't you being crazy. That's the doom loop driving your behavior. And those behaviors create real world outcomes: more legal time, more financial fallout, more energy loss. Even if you don't know attorney hourly rates, you already understand this. Conflict creates more steps. More steps creates more time. More time creates more money. And there's a cost that people don't really calculate because it doesn't show up on a legal invoice. If the emotional pillar stays unaddressed during and after divorce, it can start taking things away from you. Work, people lose focus, make mistakes, miss deadlines, derail their career, sometimes even lose their job. With relationships, friendships can fade. Family relationships get strained because you're isolated, irritable, ashamed, or you just don't have the bandwidth. Health, sleep gets wrecked, anxiety spikes, blood pressure goes up, coping behaviors get worse. And for some people, it gets dark: hopelessness, suicidal thoughts. If that's you, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't have to carry that alone. Please reach out to someone right now: a trusted person, a professional, or if you're in immediate danger, emergency services. You matter more than this moment, even if it doesn't feel like it. Now, let me add one more piece that people really need to understand about life after divorce. A lot of people think once the divorce is final, the emotions will go away. Grief and anger don't disappear because paperwork got signed. Grief and anger fade when they're processed and integrated. And if they're not processed, they keep spiking the emotional dial, sometimes weeks later, sometimes months later, right when you thought you should be over it. And if you ever thought, why am I still feeling this? Listen to this. So to put this in perspective, when you first took the test, you were at 29th percentile for grief. Okay, you were still sad. And now you're at 72. So pretty dramatic jump there. So there is something there that the scores indicate you've made significant progress on the grief.
And so the numbers going up means that what are we trying to get to 100% where I've gotten through the grief?
We like to see 80% or above.
Okay.
Like that's normal. And what you'll find, the goal is not to be rid of your grief in 10 weeks, but to make a huge leap in that is a big one. So you've done that, and I would imagine you'll continue to see that go up over time. You'll feel better. You won't be thinking about the past as much.
Okay.
But it takes what it takes. The goal isn't to magically erase grief or anger. The goal is to stop letting them run the dashboard. And this is why so many people feel confused about life after divorce. They're doing the legal work. They're trying to handle the finances. They might even be trying to move on socially or date. But internally, the emotional dial is still pegged. So life feels chaotic. If you have kids, this is where it often gets amplified because parenting becomes the place where stress shows up the most.
And remind me, where were you when you started the program? What was going on for you? And I know you have a lot going on still, but what was sort of the situation? Talk to
Yeah, we just finished figuring out the custody thing, and it was a very contentious situation. I'm not quite as fearful, I think, as I was going into the future, and that's been very helpful.
Good.
Yeah.
That's what I mean when I say the emotional dial doesn't stay in its own lane. When emotions are high, everything else costs more, especially parenting decisions and communication. But here's the good news. You don't have to solve your whole divorce today. What you need first is clarity, because right now, your brain is trying to create certainty by replaying everything. And that just keeps you stuck in the doom loop. So instead of guessing, measure. The obvious next step is to measure what you're feeling. So there's this tool. It's really cool. It's totally free. It takes a few minutes, and it gives you something most people don't have in their life after divorce, a clear snapshot of where you actually are. So here's what it does. It tells you how high your emotional dial is right now, how flooded your system is. And it breaks that down into the 4 areas we talked about earlier: relationships, identity, feelings, and thoughts. So you're not getting just one generic score, you're getting an entire map. You'll see, okay, my thinking is off the charts, or my feelings are overwhelming. My identity took a major hit, or relationships are where I'm struggling most. And one of the easiest ways to understand what this does is to think of it like a simple health check, something objective that tells you what's going on under the surface.
The test reveals things that I couldn't pick up just talking to someone about, right? Like, to a lot of times, like, self-worth, for example, your social self-worth being at 6, I wouldn't have known that it's significant, that there's something there. And so I do find it to be one of those things that's helpful for both of us to identify. It's like a blood test that just says, how you doing?
That's the point. When you can see it clearly, you can stop doing random fixes. And the part I love most about this is it's measurable. You can take it now, get your scores, start focusing on the right area, and then take it again later and see if what you're doing is actually helping. You'll be able to watch your emotional dial come down over time. And this next clip is exactly what I mean by measurable progress. Real numbers you can track, not just, I think I'm doing better.
When I started it, I was pretty big in the grief stage, and I just wasn't able to see the future of what my life looked like without him and things like that. I definitely think the class helped with that. So
Okay, good. And so you were going through divorce like early stages when you started the
no,
program, or where
my
were you?
divorce had been final for about 3 months when I started.
Okay. I'm looking at your scores here. So your original overall score was 35. Your new overall score is 81.
Mhm.
That's awesome, Brooke. I mean, that's significant.
Yeah.
That's what life after divorce looks like when you're finally getting traction. Not that everything is perfect, but you're not stuck in the loop. You're moving. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying legal and financial don't matter. They do. But I am saying this. The emotional pillar is the steering wheel. When the emotional dial is a 10, your resources get drained across the board. Time, money, energy, attention. And when you turn that dial down, your decisions get cleaner, communication gets calmer, things get less reactive, and the other meters stop being so amplified. So If life after divorce has felt confusing, heavy, or like you're stuck in a loop, start here. Take that self-test. Get your snapshot, get your roadmap, and use it as your scorecard as you rebuild. And one last note, sometimes the most helpful thing is simply hearing someone say, this is what I did that worked.
Because I made the mistake of reaching out and leaning on my friends. And as much as they cared, they just got tired. They couldn't carry the weight. It was too much to carry. And I really wore my relationships thin by my level of need, because I needed so much. I was bleeding out my eyeballs at that point. And to go to a support group where everyone has that same level of need, it felt really good. One, because it normalizes the need and it makes you realize you're justified. But two, it gives you a path forward in terms of not feeling alone. So I highly recommend it.
You don't have to do everything. You don't have to do it perfectly. You just need to take the next right step. And you need a way to measure whether what you're doing is actually working. That's how you stop guessing. That's how you interrupt the doom loop. And that's how you begin rebuilding your life after divorce.